Hello, welcome back. We're going to continue on. Will be the video tutorial for Python Django development. It's the tutorial number 10, and this is a revised total. The tutorial segment. I have revised the total number of them from 9 to 12. So this is the number 10 of the total 12 of the video tutorial segment for Python Django development. Okay. Now, last segment, we talked about how to consolidating the templates into a common ones, which is based HTML, and then the other templates will be able to use extending that to have its own unique, you know, characters or features wise. So that's how extending it, right? This segment it's rather lengthy because we're going to talk about it. It's going to be a little bit longer because we're going to talk about how to use Bootstrap and uh, and jQuery. Okay, for the folks who are not familiar with it, I now just to Bootstrap. I will put the link down, but if you look at this, the Bootstrap is really one of the best known layout web page layout. The libraries. It's it uses the CSS Cascade Start Sheet and to provide the, the layout design. It's well known. It was created by LinkedIn folks. It's in the open source community right now, so anybody can use it. So that's the Bootstrap. Okay, it's a styling tool, a library, web styling library. Actually, I was wrong. It's in the Twitter. It was created initially, but the folks in Twitter. Okay, so you can look at the on the Wikipedia. The other piece we're going to do is use is jQuery, which is also a common library in the open source community. It was for the JavaScript. As I said in the class, really, from my view, I mean, there are really two uh, libraries most well known and also go hand by hand. Uh, Bootstrap framework is used for presentation layouts and so on and so forth. jQuery is the one really tie the presentation to the content itself to glue them together. So those are the two. There are two separate relations, separate pieces, but yet then closely related. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Now, first we need to do is really to include that. The way we do it now, it's interesting because that's why now you see the advantages. Now, since every page will use the Bootstrap and the jQuery, so there's no point to if had we did not do the consolidation, we would be including that every page, every template. Now we don't need to do it because the base the base.html give us a single place to do it. Okay. Uh, in the interest of saving the time, I'm gonna just do this basically copy paste it because otherwise we would not have the time to cover the whole thing. Okay, so let me do this, and I will do a quick explanation as to what the is for. Okay, so what we're gonna do is to copy this. I already pre-made it, so I'm just gonna copy this. So I want to cover quickly a couple of things, and so the folks kind of know what we're talking about. So uh, this meta is for Microsoft, uh, different explorers and edges and stuff. It always says it's rendering based on the IE equal to edge, and you can look at for detail on this stuff. Okay, this defines the viewport for the browser. It's also because you have mobile phones, tablets, and so on and so forth. The description field is just fill in the text. You can just describe what the page is, and then the author is Jack one. None of them are particularly important. And this is actually very interesting. This is uh, the, the fave icon is a little very tiny 16 by 16 pixel icon. When you minimize the web pages, it shows. So I'm not drawing it. I just use somebody else has. It's a common source you can reference to. Okay, the title we already talked about. So this is where it starts. Okay, Bootstrap, right, and then theme, right? And I'm going to talk about dashboard separately, okay? And then we have is the Bootstrap, another Bootstrap. Let me do this. This is the day picker is something we'll be using later, okay? And just for now, just leave it alone. So basically, those are the ones we are adding to, okay? These, okay? So this is what we are adding to, okay? Now, we did this is the star sheet. Now, what we also need to do is add the JavaScript jQuery. One of the things, folks, uh, it is pretty common practice where we will add the JavaScript at the end of the block, the HTML page. The thinking is say, okay, because the JavaScript tend to be rather big, and it would be good to load after the page content because the way it renders the page layout first, and then load the JavaScript to do the the glue the logic and data together. So it would be better to load that later, and then always says make the page load faster. Okay, so what we are uh, including is a number of things. First is jQuery, okay, and then Bootstrap. Okay, the order is very interesting. Notice I always put jQuery first, and then because it's cascade, the loading sequence. So the last loaded always overwrites the one before. So that's the order I have. Okay, so that's it in terms of including it. Now I want to do one more piece. Later on, we will be writing our own little JavaScript. So let's just put a block here so we can say, you know, uh, we will do the. This is where we're putting our logo script. Okay, it's the same technique we have used in the right. So all right. So okay, so now I just did the inclusion, and let's see what actually happened. Okay, you will see the differences. Now we are loaded start sheet already. Okay, so look at this. The entire fonts and the colors are changed. The reason for that is the magic of Bootstrap. Okay, basically Bootstrap star sheet library redefines the fonts, the default fonts, the colors, as well as the size and all these things. Okay, so that's what the Bootstrap does. It does looks pretty. I mean, from a styling perspective, it's better than what we had before. Okay, so that's the first step. We included the star sheet and the JavaScript, and then the next step is we're going to make some really significant layout changes, presentation changes. Okay, now I what what I was thinking about is the layout we wanted to do is to let me make this bigger to see it. So what we wanted to is actually make a header here, right? It's pretty common, and then we put a side panel here, and we have a footer here, right? And then the main content of the site will be located here. Okay, so that's what we want to do. Uh, I mean, a lot of folks in the layout industry, professional call this the C clamp because it kind of representing a letter C. Okay, a C clamp. Okay, so basically the title, or the heading here, side panel, footer, and then the main body of the content. Okay, so now the first thing we need to do is put the header here. How do we do that? Well, instead of go through a lot of stuff, there is a library. Bootstrap folks has nice enough to create it. The the library, what they use as an example to illustrate the Bootstrap is called dashboard, which is here. It's this piece. Okay, it's the dashboard. It's a example library. Bootstrap folks, the folks made the Bootstrap framework, made it just to show theirs. Let me show you what the look like. Okay, because it does show you how. So this is the dashboard library look and feel, right? Look at this. It's very, other than the footer, it actually is exactly where we want it. It has the header here, has the side panel, and it has the main body here. Okay, so that's what we're gonna use, and which is exactly what I did. I included it here. Okay, now how do we get the header show up on this? Okay, so next, that's what next we're gonna do. So let's go back to what we have here. Hold on a second. Yeah, so this is what we have. Okay, so now we're gonna do make the header show up the header. So the header always, one thing we notice, right? The header always stays throughout all the pages. So the look the natural location for the header is actually in the base.html because it shows up everywhere, right? So the way, I mean, you really should just look at the Bootstrap online document. And basically, the quick thing is it says I put a dev. In this entire line 28 all the way to 46 is the header. Okay, it's a navigation bar. Inverse means it's the background is black and the text is white, and it's fixed at the top. Right, it's a navigation for navigations, and I am defining two uh, menus, home and about. Okay, so if I reload this, you will see it. Right, there you go. That's the header. Okay, now one of the advantage of this, actually, if you look at this, the Bootstrap folks, when they design it, already done that for us. Watch this. It collapses it. Right. So that's how you what they call this is a responsive design. So even in a phone case, if you're viewing vertically with a phone, you still be able to access this, right? So okay, so that's what the first step we did. Now the next step is we want to add a footer. Well, I mean, in the example they don't give us one, so we're gonna make one. Okay, uh, this is the footer piece, right? We wanted to notice here, if you look at this, right, I mean, our page is this big, right? We want to get this piece on the bottom. That's what the footer is, right? So right now it doesn't. So now, so what we're gonna do is use some of the defined. Hold on a second, why is this? Okay, so what we're gonna do is do some styling on this piece, the foot block. Okay, and it just happened I already done it, so I'll just use this. Okay, so the styling of the footer is actually a pretty interesting one. So let me put this here so at least I can let me just put this here. So it's the footer nav bar fix the button. Okay, so this is actually all part of the Bootstrap. Okay, so I did not create it. Okay, so that's what this looks like. Now, one thing noticed actually, I have another in the footer. I have a link called about, right? But I'm already putting this in the header already, so I wouldn't be needing that. So let me just delete this. Okay, so just delete this. So we'll have footer. Okay, this if I reload it, this will put this all the way to the bottom. Okay, so that's the footer. Well, I mean, if you look at this, right, this is not a very pretty. I mean, it doesn't. The colors are all blended with background. It's hard to tell it's a footer. This is where we want to use this as a something customization. So the way you do it is in the star sheet here, we will create our own star sheet. Let's call it Rango. Okay? Rango. Hold on a second. Why is this? So create our own star sheet. It's called Rango, right? So what's in it actually is we wanted to change the background of the footer to something to make the whole bar across. It's just like the heading, okay? So here what we're gonna do is actually knowingly this portion, right? Look at it. Let me go back. In here, I have the footer, right? The class. So what we need to do is actually change the footer to a background, something different from the current white. Okay, so the way you do this is again, folks. I mean, most of these things on this particular segment, most things we talked about are really HTML related the topic. Okay, so what I do is to create a custom star sheet, right? And then override the default color with the color of this is actually a blue of the AvTech logo. Okay, so I also did a padding at the bottom top. But the reason if I don't do this, I'll show you if I don't have it. Okay, so let's do this, and I'll start it, reload it. Look at this. So that gave you a beautiful footer, right? Now notice the picture actually covers almost the edge of it. It doesn't look pretty. So we can also uh, override the default, the padding top and bottom to create enough space. At least visually, it's a little bit more appealing. Okay, so that's how you achieve the customization. The way you do it, because again, the word cascade star sheet, right? So the last load, uh, the last one loaded will override the one before. So we put this in the last. Okay, it's the last inclusion after the bootstrap, right? So the footer will be overridden by our own def, uh, attribute definition. Okay, so now we got the header and the footer. Now we needed to work on the side. Okay, to do the sidebar side, actually it's a little bit complicated. Okay, so to do that, first let's look at the most obvious way to do this. Okay, so the most obvious way to do this is if you look at the index, which is this page, right? So the thinking is, well, why don't we just put the entire thing, right? The same content here on the base because we wanted this to show all the time, right? So the goal, my thinking at least is to say I have a header here, I have a footer here, I have a side panel here, right? And when I click on this, the content shows up here, okay, right? And when I click on this will be replaced with the Python category, okay? So and that's what I wanted to. Okay, so the first step to achieve this, The first step is how do we put this on the side panel, leave the content blank, right? So the most obvious way to do this is actually say, okay, we copy this and put this in the base, right? We define a side panel and we define a content, okay? So we define two blocks. Right now, we only have one content block, which covers the entire page, right? We need to split this into two, okay? So to do this, I'm gonna just use the work I've done because it's it's kind of I'm gonna just copy paste over because the timing, okay? So let's do this. So let's do this. So we're gonna create a two blocks. Okay. So right now this is basically it's a container with a row because we're treating this entire thing as a row. Okay, so the row one, row two, row three, right? So then within the row I split into two. One is the side block and the other is the main content. Okay, now the little bit bootstrap concept here, the this is actually defines the column. It goes by what they call 12 column uh, concept, meaning the entire presentation space is being sliced into divided into 12 columns, and then you can decide the portion of it, right? So what I'm saying is uh, 3 column is used by side panel, 9 column is used by the main content. You really need to look at the explanation of these on the Bootstrap help document to kind of figure out this. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The bottom line is this is 3 column with the width of the side panel, okay, and then you know the I'm sorry, let me get rid of this. Okay, so we basically it's a 3 column on the left, and the main body of the block is it's 9 column. Okay, so it's basically if divided by the total is 12 column. Right? So that's what really needs to make sure you understand it. And then proportion wise, this is 3 column, this is 9 column. Total is 12 column. It's the way the layout and Bootstrap design folks come up the concept with. I mean, there are also 16 columns, 9 columns, but the 12 columns is the most common layout. All right. So once we did this, if you reload it, nothing changes. It just tells you the if it reloads it, you will see this is the 3 column width in terms of side panel. This is the main content panel. Okay, now what we're gonna do is to actually say, okay, let's place this on the side panel, right? So if we do this, put the index this all to the to the left. I mean, that's the most obvious way to think this. So it shows up here, right? So now we don't, we basically we achieved what's on the left, right? But the problem is when you click, nothing happens, right? Now you say, okay, but well, what would that work if we put on the on the right, right? So because we're gonna do this, so it's the main page. Now it's on the right, right? It's the same thing because basically when you click on this, it's supposed to go to the constructed page, right? You see this? It's read routes to this, and when you call this, it does not have a category to draw anymore. It's supposed to go to the main the course is supposed to select the course belong to this category, but that they are not passing in. If you look at the view here, this is where the view is where it gets all the gets all the data dictionary where the template is able to paint the data to. So it's not as straightforward as we think it is. Okay, so the way we do this actually is we're gonna the Django folks has introduced a concept. It's called uh, template. Create a template tag. Okay, the topic of the template tag is on the chapter 14. Okay, so what it is to say, you know what, uh, because this page is actually this side of the content, you want to stay throughout when you click around different places. So why don't we just bundle them into a customized template tag, and then we can pass that throughout different pages. So to do that, it's actually, again, the chapter 14 of Tango with Django has a very good uh, you know tutorial on this. I'm going to do this in a relatively quick way. Okay, so the first to do that is actually we need to create a package within a package. It's called template tag. Okay, so we need to create a, so this is within the Rango directory. You create a template folder, which it really should be a package because it needs to have init.py. Okay, you have to have that, otherwise it won't work. Okay, so the next thing you do is actually uh, in this directory, you need to create a let me copy this stuff. Okay, so it's much easier that way. So you need to create is basically a Rango. The name is not a particularly important, but we call it Rango extra pi. Okay, and in that, what we're gonna do is to use this function to load the category records all in one shot. Okay, so you probably see this uh, in our view.py. If you look at this in the view.py, you see this where we are loading the here, right? You see the index, it loads, right? It only loads 5, but we in this case we're loading everything. If we want to, we can load just the top 5. Okay, but we're loading everything in this example. So it loads everything and goes to give to uh, a dictionary with a name called cat. Okay, and now we're going to explain this a bit later. Okay, explain this. You know what, let me do this. So let me, okay, so we'll do this. So now the way this is the magic. Okay, you need to call red. This is a decorator. It says basically marry this function to this particular template cats.html, which we need to create. Okay, so let's create a new one, and a cat in the templates called cats. All right, so in this, right, what we're gonna do is actually we're gonna just, it's actually almost a duplicate of what we have here, basically to list uh, the entire the records of the categories we were able to get from the database, right? So let me just go to the templates. I'll just copy this because it's, okay. So basically, if you look at this, it says if the cat exists, which is here, right? If the cat is exist, right? Because you are binding the HTML to this, okay? So it says if a cat is existed, I will create have a you know title, and then I listed all the records, right? And then if it is none, you say no, okay? So I also put the added category here too, okay? So when I done this, then what you need to do is in the base, remember I said we will use, it's the customized, right? So in the base, what we do is we will just use this, reference this, okay? So we will just, you reference this. Now, this basically achieved the first step. Let's look, reload this, and then you look at if this actually works, right? So we'll do this, right? So let's not worry about this, okay? Just look at this first. So get careless, expect end block. Do you forget register or load tag? Okay, basically it says is I'm reference to this template tag without uh, loading it. So what I need to do is just like in here, everything in Django, in the template language, you have to say you want to load. So this is what I load, okay? So we will load, right? Rango extra. Okay. So basically, this allows us to reference that particular special tag. Okay. So oh wait a minute, it's received too many position argument. Okay. Let's look at the what we did. I kind of know what we did, but let me just do this. Okay. So all right. So now we got it. Okay. So uh, this is what on the site, right? So we have the, the content of the categories, and it's very much like what we had on index, okay? So now we got to this, make this stay on the left. So what next we need to do is actually to say, okay, now we have this piece. Now we need to do is to say when I click here, we're gonna show this here, right? But before we do this, let's just add something here just to 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 know, let folks know the main body, okay? So we'll say welcome to Rango or to Tango with Django, okay? So now we know, at least we know this. So this is the main content and the left card, okay? Now the next step is we're gonna, when we click this, we want to show that page, right? So on the index.html, this is really doesn't do much right now because the original one was listing all the categories, which on the left is already doing it, right? So now what we need is really to show the categories, right? So we will uh, let's stop here. I'm gonna move because it's take much longer. We're gonna do this in the uh, video segment 11. Okay, this is a 10, but we're going to do finish the Bootstrap and the jQuery and the video segment number 11. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back. We'll be back for the 11 to finish up this because the tutorial gets too long. All right, thank you.